Hey, it's Minute Book Reports, and this is the second part of my reading update for Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and that's still hard for me to say, but this is the final reading update. I originally planned to have like 3 or 4 of these, and I probably could have made 3 or 4 of these, but I just liked reading this book so much that I just ended up reading it all. And so my total reading time for chapters 6 through 11 was 3 hours and 45 minutes, which puts my total reading time for this entire book at about 6 hours and 15 minutes, which is fairly fast. I really like this book, and there's not a lot I could say that I didn't enjoy, but there are some things I want to bring up that I thought would be somewhat open for discussion, just some comments. So the first thing is the idea of too many character syndrome. You know, I experience this a lot in some Victorian lit where there's so many characters I can't really remember. In this book, I think at times it suffers from the same thing. You know, there's so many children, and at the end, I believe the image is 10 children and a bird. And that's the image I'm supposed to have going forward. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's a lot of children. You know, like, I know that they have their own unique abilities, and that's how we know them. We know them based on their abilities. Slowly, some of the characters, some of the children are sort of developing a personality. We kind of get to see a little bit more about them. I was surprised Bronwyn was such an important character in this story. I wouldn't have known that from the beginning of the book. I assumed it was going to be about Jacob and Emma and Enoch and Millard, and even to some extent I thought it'd be about Victor, but he turned out to be not important in this story, which is kind of frustrating because they spent so much time on Victor. I thought he would play like a very important role, but he didn't. They just buried him, and that was it. I think one of the challenges of reading Harry Potter is trying to remember all the characters. Who is who? And in the movies, they do a really great job because a lot of them are very distinct in their appearance. They're easy to recognize, and I'm sure they did that on purpose because there's so many characters. But in the book version, when I remember reading the book, if it wasn't for the movie, I wouldn't have connected sometimes. There's so many teachers, there's so many students. And maybe that's just me. I'm not good with names. I'm not good with keeping track of all these things. For me, I tend to hone in on the main characters, but I often miss the peripheral characters, the secondary characters that don't really, what I feel, have a lot to do with the main plot. And that's a mistake by me as a reader. I miss out on a lot of the extra intrigue, the subtleties of the book, because oftentimes when I am introduced to a new character, I have to decide in my mind, okay, is this an important character or is this just a secondary character that they're in the book, but I don't have time to get to know them. Their purpose does not really matter. And in this book, I made a mistake where I assumed that Victor was very important. In fact, I assumed that Enoch was also going to be some sort of bad kid, but and maybe that's a possibility in the future, but the way that it was written, I was like, is this guy a bad guy? Is he going to turn into a bad guy? Or is he going to be a good guy? Is he going to play along and help them? But I completely miss Bronwyn. You know, I just overlooked her, and she played a critical role in this book. You know, she was one of the super close friends, you know, like that group of supporting characters for the main character, you know, his friend. And I totally missed that because I just assumed, well, she's just another child in the house, just like Olive, the girl who flies away. To me, that she's a secondary character, but I didn't invest that much into Bronwyn as I was reading the story. And so by the time the ending comes along and she's in there, Bronwyn is in there, you know, she is the sort of back hero or hidden hero of this story. Without her, they wouldn't have even made it to the lighthouse to sort of fight against the bad guy. And I didn't invest that time into getting to know her as a character. I completely overlooked her, and that was my mistake. Whereas during the Victor part, I'm like reading into it. I'm like, all right, what's this guy gonna do? What's this guy gonna do? You know, what is the twist? Is he the bad guy, or what's going on with him? And he's not really anything. And so I guess as sort of a commentary on reading, we do make these quick judgments on characters. I feel like it's important. It's very difficult to treat every character the same. I know that we probably should, and maybe the author wants that, but it's hard. And especially when you're talking about a mystery story here, if you invest the time and interest into every character, sometimes you don't. It doesn't pay off, and you only have so much attention. You can only remember so much unless you read the entire book in one sitting. I'm reading it over a course of days, and if I have to invest my time in a character that I feel like is not going to pay off in the end, that just takes up more of that memory in me, and I can't pay attention to other details, the other things, like Dr. Golan, for example. I'm glad that reveal at the end happened. That was excellent. I thought that was a really good reveal. But I wouldn't have paid attention if I didn't feel like that character was important. I felt like that character was important at the end. And I'm glad it paid off. But there are other characters that I'm like, what happened? One last comment I want to make is the trouble that some of these stories run into when they talk about elements they introduce to us that are brand new, that are not natural, and then they start to break down, and then their explanation for them breaking down sometimes doesn't come across as clear. So what I mean by that is in the story we're introduced to time loops, basically where they're able to sort of remain stuck in a set amount of time. This one day keeps repeating over and over again. For everyone else in this time loop, they reset. Each day they reset, except for the children. They remember and they continue to age, but not age physically, but just they remember. It's not like everyone's memory gets wiped out. So when it comes to time loops, there's this moment in the story where they try to explain why the time loop didn't continue, why it moved and progressed another day. For the children, for Miss Peregrine, for everyone. And I think that's where it wasn't communicated as well. I was trying to figure out what happened. To me, the only explanation that they provided was that for some reason, Miss Peregrine, she couldn't keep up the time loop. And I did not know what that meant. I don't understand why she couldn't transform back. I thought it was because she didn't want to, she wanted to have clothes on, so she was kind of ashamed if she transformed back, she wouldn't have, because she's a bird, right? She wouldn't have any clothes on. But I didn't understand why the time loop didn't continue, and for that matter, why I guess the children didn't start to age. So it was my belief that if you left the time loop and you went back into the real world, that you would then start to begin to age. And so that's illustrated with like the apple. When he takes the apple, it ages so rapidly that it disintegrates. But then the children here, they break out of the time loop. And I assume that when you move through from 1940 to whatever we're in, the 2000s, if that were the case and you were to age rapidly because you're out of this protective time loop, then that would also apply if the time loop breaks and you continue life the following day, because you're still outside of that protective time loop. So that was where I wasn't quite clear. I know that last scene with the kids in the longboat, and then we see the battleships far in the distance. I understand that, but it's kind of surprised me. I thought I was like more worried about them. I thought, oh my goodness, they are about to be disintegrated. Like vampires, they're just gonna, vaporize. Although not all vampires do that. But I really thought that they were gonna like vaporize because they were out of the time loop. It's broken, and now they are going to age to their proper age, not to whatever relative time it was. So they're not like children anymore. They would, whatever their age was, whether it's 70 or 80 or 100 or whatever, they would catch up to that because they broke out of the time loop. It didn't matter if they were in the 1940s or if they jumped to the 2000s. They would just, as soon as they break that time loop, they age. That's what I thought would happen, but apparently that wasn't the case. So I think there's this issue of whenever you introduce these new sciences, these new things that exist in this world, that's absolutely okay to have that, these new systems. But I felt like it wasn't quite clear at the end why this time loop ended. And maybe that's something for the next book. Maybe that's something that will be explained later on. But for me, I had no idea. And I just came to the conclusion like, well, I guess it just stopped because? Question mark? I mean, that's all I had, you know? So, but I really like this book. And those are my only comments that I would provide. I talked about this in the other video about being drawn into wanting to finish the book and wanting to continue reading as the reader. And this book does that extremely well. You know, the idea that Jacob and these children can actually fight these monsters, although they can't see them, Jacob can. The fact that he can actually fight them without any special powers. I like that. You know, he has the ability to see them, and maybe he'll have more powers. I don't know. But the fact that he can actually fight them, I like that. I like the fact that you can actually destroy them. As a person, you're able to destroy them. And now he sort of takes on that role that his grandfather had as the hunter of Hologast. You know, he is that person, and I like that. You know, it's one of those things where I wouldn't have seen Jacob as his grandfather, because his grandfather is painted as this abandoner, as this soldier, as this old crazy guy. But now, after learning who he is, we see that Jacob is becoming him. He's continuing that family sort of legacy and it isn't just about going out there and hunting these things down. But the courage, I think, that he demonstrates, those personality traits that his grandfather passed on to him through all those stories, that's the legacy, I think, that we can see through Jacob's character, that his grandfather lives on through Jacob. It isn't just the name and the genetics, even the ability to that extent. It's the legacy of his character. And his character is one that is willing to take on that big fight, to be brave and courageous and not worry about all these things. You know, Jacob has this moment where he's like, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and fight these people. And then he realized that he's not trained. You know, he's not a soldier like his grandfather was, who was trained in the army. So he's thinking, okay, I'm going to take some kind of karate lessons. I'm going to go to the gun range. I'm going to learn how to shoot guns. You know, I like that. That's a really good, that's a very well thought person who's like, well, they were able to succeed because they had all this training. I don't have that training. Okay, what can I do to get up to that level so that I am somewhat prepared? And just taking these classes would be a good step. He's sort of probably going to be more of a on-the-job training type of thing, where he's probably going to pick up skills as he continues to fight them. But just that awareness to want to learn, I like that. I think that's great. He's not running away from the character he's supposed to be. He's learning to embrace that, and he's learning to better himself in very practical and real ways, or at least thinking about those things, those ways to better himself. So those are my thoughts on Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar. Still hard for me to say. I'm glad the next books are shorter titles. But those are my thoughts, and I really like this book. I think it's worth reading. Again, you'll get through the middle of the book, up to the middle pretty fast. But once you hit about chapter 10, where there's that huge chapter, don't be discouraged. That chapter will go fast because there's so much interesting information in there. And then, of course, the conclusion of the book. But it's a really great read. It's very fast. In my opinion, it's very fast. And it will draw you in. It will suck you in. It's interesting. Jacob becomes likable. And the characters around him, although they're somewhat time sensitive, they're old, right? They live in this old world. They don't live in our world with modern technology. So their minds are sort of stuck in 1940s. But they become likable too. And it's not just because it was a simpler time back then, but their personalities, some of them are starting to sort of bloom out. You know, again, characters like Emma, Bronwyn, we see Millard, Enoch. These are the characters that are I think, very important to get to know. And I'm glad that Jacob has a group of friends that he can rely on to further whatever his mission is going to be in this story. So thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.